you owe $800,000, but they're worth $300,000. What do? Oh, crap, the warehouse caught fire. So I've been renting exotic cars for almost 20 years now. And as somebody who's been doing it for a long time, I've become an industry expert. And one of the questions I get, and I sniff them out every time, is somebody calling up, and it's always like a broker or somebody that you flush them out eventually. Hey, I just got a question. So who do you guys use for insurance? And, I get I have to use my own, but like, who do you use for insurance? Can you send me your policy? I'm like, guy, what are you looking for? Like, that's the single most difficult thing when starting an exotic car rental company is to get the correct insurance. And it's so difficult and so costly that it doesn't deter people from starting companies. It makes people work around it. And that's not necessarily the best play, because the only workaround from that is insurance fraud. Because now you're going out, you're either doing one of two things. You're either operating without the correct insurance and running a huge risk, and you're probably out of trust with either your bank or whoever you're working with when the vehicles aren't properly insured. Or if it's your own money, you're just risking that if something happens, you're going to have to write a check for it. It's much less likely that that's the case, because most people with money are much smarter than that, than to start an exotic car rental company. They'll go do anything else that's easier. So you generally get these scrappy guys that come out and they don't have the right insurance, and then they just go the route of insurance fraud, which is just keeping it on. And Miami's a perfect example for this. Imagine you don't have the right insurance, you're borrowing somebody's car. Insert any number of possibilities that is not a correct corporate structure as would be packaged for the sale of a company. Somebody gets in an accident. Oh my God, I just crashed the car. What's the first thing they say? All right, listen to me very carefully. This is Ramon's car, you borrowed Ramon's car, like you have to say this, because if you don't, there's not going to be any insurance and you're going to get sued and these guys are going to come after you because you crashed the car. And it just becomes like everybody now lying to cover somebody's mistake versus just doing it right the first time. Now, there were a couple of companies that actually insure. Most people don't. And the reason that the industry isn't really insurable anymore is because of the guys that start companies. The same guy that's going to commit insurance fraud is the same guy that doesn't necessarily know how to run a business profitably, that's going to then use their insurance as an exit strategy. Put a bunch of miles on these cars, rack up all these miles, all the maintenance and everything like that. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh crap, that car needs a $40,000 engine. Just call it in stolen, bro. Or you run your business into the ground and you pull every dollar out of it, and you've got this fleet of high mileage exotics that are always broken and it's not worth anything, so you can't sell them because you owe $800,000, but they're worth $300,000. What do? Oh crap, the warehouse caught fire. Or something like that, or somebody broke in, smashed all the cars, or set fire to the lot. Having these big multi-million-dollar claims is what really drove these people, the insurance carriers, away from it. Or you're getting desperate and you're renting cars to people that don't have insurance or don't have the proper insurance. Then they hit somebody, and next thing you know, you got 3 people with soft tissue damage. And your policy, where you're paying a reasonable amount of money, is now getting a check for $2.5 million written for 3 people with soft tissue damage in the back of their necks. That's one of the reasons that the insurance became sort of uninsurable. Now, what do you do there? Well, there is a state fund in a lot of places where the state fund will force insurance carriers to insure you. So imagine being in a situation where you're insured by Progressive. I'm just going to make up company names here. Progressive is a real company. I don't think they've ever insured the space, but imagine Progressive was my insurance carrier. I make enough claims that they're like, you know what? We're not going to insure you anymore. Well, crap, Progressive, that was my play right there. It's about to get really expensive. I've got to go to the state fund. And now the state fund takes all these high-risk people, and that's uninsurable individuals and companies, and then they divvy them up amongst all the insurance carriers in the state. It's part of you being licensed to sell insurance in that state is that you have to take some of the high-risk pool as well. So that risk is spread out among everybody. So there's a good chance that Progressive can drop me, but through the state fund, I end up back in Progressive. I could end up in any company. But there is a chance that the company that drops you could end up being the one that ultimately insures you if you go through that route. And I'll give it to everybody just because this is the easy one. There's a company called Prime Insurance. So if you want to start an exotic car rental company, you go to Prime Insurance. It's about the same as the State Fund, and it offers you effectively like a catastrophe policy for a lot of money. And this is what a lot of the companies do. And you have to. If you're going to be a legitimate company, and why would you want to be a legitimate company, right? We'll get to that in a second. But if you're going to be a legitimate company, you go through this, it's usually 10%, it's 8 to 10% of the value of your vehicle. So if you have a $200,000 car, you're going to be paying between 8 and 10% of the physical value of the car for your physical damage coverage. Now you're looking at $16,000 to $20,000 now per year for that one aspect of the coverage. Now you need your liability coverage. That's another $3,000 to $6,000 per vehicle. So now you're looking at anywhere between $24,000 and $26,000 to insure one car. It starts making the fraudulent insurance fraud seem a little bit more appetizing because you have a $200,000 car just to rent it out to that point to now cover the maintenance, the depreciation, the interest expense, the labor overhead, and all of that. Now you start adding $25,000 to insurance. It just gets up there real quick, and it's really tough to stomach for a lot of people, which is essentially why a lot of people go the wrong path. And the problem is, why would you want to go the right path? Well, if you want your company to have a value at any point in time, if you have a longer term goal than just making money to make it through to next month and then the next month and the next month, you have to build up a company with a value. I've had people, and they always do the same thing. As they start to go out of business or they start to run dry, they come try to sell me their company. There was one company up in Boston that we bought for $5,000. If your company's only worth $5,000, it's essentially worth zero. I'm just throwing you $5,000 to be nice. And the only thing that I saw value in that guy's company was buying the quote name, the website, and his contact list. He wanted $50,000 at first, which when you're only asking $50,000 for your company, something's wrong to begin with. But giving the guy $5,000 was just a token. I'll give you somebody's got to give you $5,000 for it. And if I get any of these customers to convert, then maybe I'll break even, maybe I'll make a couple of bucks. And I don't think I got anyone to convert. I think I ended up giving the guy $5,000 ultimately, but it was worth it. He was the only competition up in Boston. We always serviced Boston from New York, but the fact that he's no longer there, I mean, I got to attribute that him not being there has made me $5,000 over the years. But if you want your company to be worth something, you have to be able to hand somebody a set of books, and the books have to reflect all this stuff. If you're going to sell your company, which ultimately should be the goal of any business, is that you're creating something that has a value that you can then sell and then go sit on a beach somewhere. Whether you take the approach that you're just covering your mortgage payment on your property every month, like imagine you had a gas station. You didn't really care about making too much money other than paying your bills and paying your mortgage. But after 20 years, you could turn around and sell that property for $2 million. There's your retirement. Now, look at that with a company. If you are only doing this, and like if something happens like a pandemic and you have to shut your doors, you've got no value. You want to build up a company that has a value that you can look at it and another company can be like, great, I can do something with this. When you say, all right, I borrow cars from that guy, I don't really have insurance, they look at this and they're like, you're worth nothing. And a lot of companies that have tried to sell to me, when they do, I always do an NDA, so I'm not going to mention their names, but I look at their books and they're laughable. Oh, well, we don't own that car. We don't own that car. We don't own. I'm like, well, how are you renting a car you don't own? Number one is the first thing that your commercial policy says is you can't rent cars that you don't own. So whenever people call me up, and I hate saying no, it's like, hey, I've got a Lambo. I'd love for you guys to rent it out and split the revenue to help cover my payments. I can't do it. Like, I'd have to register that car to my company. If I don't, I'm now committing fraud against my insurance. And they do this specifically to limit their risk. When they're telling you, you're paying me to insure these 20 cars, that's a fixed quantity. They can measure that risk. When they're insuring 5 cars, but you're really renting 30 cars, that risk is all over the place. There's no accountability for maintenance. There's no accountability that the car is actually being taken care of properly. Who's responsible for maintaining that car? Who's inspecting that car in between? And it just gets into a real proper show. And that's why insurance is the single most important part of starting an exotic car rental company. And it's probably the most neglected of all aspects of the business. And people will go out borrowing money. That's your business. You want to go borrow money at 25% from a loan shark, you do that. You can do that in many ways. Insurance is something that by paying somebody a lot of interest, that's just a dumb move to me. By committing insurance fraud, it's an actual felony. And you shouldn't be running your company around relying on a felony if you have to prevent you from going out of business.
Homeowners insurance may just seem like some boring thing that you have to get a mortgage, but it can be a surprising way to actually save a lot of money. Policy Genius is your advocate to do that. They shop your policy and your insurance needs amongst all the major carriers and find you the best deal. In fact, every time it renews, Policy Genius does it all over again. They check everybody else, they make sure you're getting the best deal, and if there's a better deal out there, they switch you for free. Policy Genius can also bundle your homeowner's policy with your car insurance policy and save you even more. Policy Genius has saved their combined auto and home insurance customers an average of $1,127 a year. So visit the link in the description below, tell them a little bit about yourself and your property, and they'll tell you if you're getting the best deal. Be sure to thank them for their support of VinWiki.